Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tempe City Council work-study meeting. Item number 1 is call to order. Council meetings can be watched in real time via Cox Cable Channel 11 and at tempe.gov/tempe11. Members of the public may also attend the meeting virtually through Microsoft Teams. Guidelines for conduct at City Council meetings are on the table near the entrance for those in attendance at tonight's meeting. We will now play a video with the proper protocol for ensuring the appropriate conduct at City Council meetings.
The City of Tempe welcomes public comment at this time. Disruptive behavior will not be allowed. Continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal from the council chambers. We need to be able to hear everyone in the room. Behavior that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of any city council meeting is not helpful and is not permitted. This includes behavior both inside and outside of the council chambers. Should individuals inside the council chambers become disruptive so that city business is not able to be conducted, the mayor will first ask that the individuals allow city business to be completed. There will be time for public comment during the call to the audience portion of the meeting. If no cooperation, the mayor will issue a verbal warning and let them know that the continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal from the council chambers. If there is still no cooperation, the mayor will issue a second verbal warning and let them know that the continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal from the council chambers. If there is no cooperation after asking and 2 verbal warnings, then the mayor will ask security officers to remove only those individuals who are causing the disruption. Security personnel should not engage in any way, but only escort them from the council chambers. If individuals refuse to leave, security personnel shall warn them that they are trespassing and that the next step will be arrest by a Tempe police officer. Tempe officers may have to arrest if individuals refuse to leave. Charges for trespass and disorderly conduct may apply, as well as other charges. Should anyone be asked to be removed, the mayor will recess the meeting.
Thank you very much. Next up, item 2, call to the audience. The City Council welcomes public comment at this time for the issue review session and committee of the whole items on this work study session agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. Madam Clerk, are there any speaker cards this evening?
None received.
Okay, then I will close that portion of the meeting and move on to item 3A, which is our 2024 Community and Employee Survey results. And I see Whitell Holmes and Chris Tatham coming up. Welcome. Oh, you're adding the jacket to the shirt now. I see what's going on. All right, I see.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having Chris and I here today. I'm Whitell Holmes. I'm the Director of our Strategic Management and Innovation Office. And today we have the results of both our Community Employee Survey results from 2024. Just as a reminder, this presentation is aligned to our employee engagement performance measure, as well as employees and our community feeling invited to participate in city decisions. And our being data-driven governance, we have the pleasure of having Mr. Tatham wear our Tempe Loves Data shirt. So appreciate that participation with Tempe. So with that, just want to introduce Chris Tatham. He is the Executive Director of ETC Institute, and he flies out here every year from Olathe, Kansas, just for Tempe. And I'll share what he does. He will share what he doesn't do for other clients that he does for Tempe. So thank you, Chris.
Anyway, Mayor, members of council, it's great to be back. For those of you who don't know or maybe don't remember, my first presentation was back in 1998. We did a survey for your park system to figure out how to do the master plan for the new lake and everything at the time. So I probably made about 50 presentations to this body over the past 6 years. So it's good to be back. One of the things those of you who've been around for a while know I tell like it is. So there's been times I've delivered what's not so good news, but lots of times I've been able to deliver good news. This is one of those good news years. So it's great to be back and share some really good findings. I'm going to walk you through briefly the results of the community survey. That's what we get the input from residents each year. And every other year we rotate between doing an employee survey and a business survey. So this is the employee survey year. So I'm going to give you some of those highlights as well. As far as the community or resident survey, it's really the objective tool the city uses each year to make sure that the average resident's input is listened to and incorporated into city decision-making process. Public meetings are very important, great way for people to express their views on issues, but the average person doesn't typically show up to those. So it's kind of a way to balance that to make sure you're really meeting the needs and expectations of residents because they change over time and be able to respond to those changes. We also share some of the results, so how you stack up to other communities, and I'm going to show some of those tonight. Tempe tends to be one of the high performers throughout the country, and it's well deserved with all your years of commitment to getting input from residents. As far as the survey methodology, it hasn't changed much in the last couple years. It's radically different when we first started doing phone calls years ago. Nobody answers their phones anymore, but it's still a random survey. What we do is we select 500 households in each of the 8 character areas. We mail them surveys, send them postcards. We do social media ads on their media feeds. We send them texts. We send them emails. We even let them call us back or leave messages. So it takes a lot of effort, but the city still is very responsive. Our goal was to get 800 households to participate, 100 per character area. We actually ended up having over 1,000, which is very, very good. The results aren't perfect, but they're accurate within about plus or minus 3% at the 95% level of confidence. And that just means if we did the survey 100 times, we get the same results within about 3% or less. So overall, it's very good representation. If you look at this map, this just shows the locations of respondents based on their block address. We don't archive the exact address to protect the privacy of respondents. There we go. But you can see we have good respondents throughout the city. In addition, we compare the results of the survey each year, the demographics to the previous years and to the census, making sure that it's consistent so that we don't suddenly have a change in sample composition, which changes the results. And since we do 100 surveys, at least in each character area, we then weight the data because some character areas have more residents than others to make sure it's truly representative of the city's overall population. So with that said, I'm going to start off with some of the really great news to lead this off. First, we have several questions about the perceptions of the city, and these are things that I consider to be kind of strategic indicators of health. Done this now for almost 30 years. Communities that rank high or get high scores in these tend to be looking at promising futures. Communities that get low ratings in these areas tend to be seeing diminishing futures. What you'll notice on this chart is in the dark blue is the results for Tempe. This is the percentage of residents who gave positive ratings or 4s and 5s on a 5-point scale. The blue is the national average for US data that ETC Institute collects. And then we have a mid-sized city average to give you a sense for what other cities between 100 and 250,000, how they rate. A couple things I want to highlight on this one that really stand out to me. First, overall quality of city services among the very best in the nation. You're at 83%, which is 34% above the national average. May not always feel that way when residents aren't happy with things, but at the end of the day, there's more than 8 out of 10 residents that think you're doing really good. What's not shown on here is the intensity of the 5s. You have a high percentage of folks who give you a 5 on a 5-point scale. Very few people give negative ratings, 1 or 2. The vast majority of the remaining 17% are people who are okay or give what we call a neutral rating. Other things that I want to highlight are just your customer service rating. I think when I show you the employee results, it won't be a surprise. Your employees are really contributing to the way residents feel about the city. Nearly 3 out of 4 residents has a positive perception of your employees. Nationally, it's not even 4 out of 10. So that's tremendous. In addition, if you look at your leadership ratings, you're at 62%, which is 24% above the national average. So you're doing a lot of things right as a city, leading residents in the way they want you to go. And I think that's one of the reasons you see so many double-digit advantages comparatively on this chart. And it's not limited here. In fact, when we look at some of the things related to quality of life and some of your specific city services, I was here back maybe 10, 12 years ago. If anybody remembers when we had some issues with trash and I got to deliver the bad news on that, that's fully recovered now. You're now at 91% on trash collection. Recycling's at 86 and bulk trash is at 85, among the best ratings in the nation. But if you were back here, you remember me saying that you were trailing the nation. So you've seen steady progress year after year after year, which you should be really proud of. Other things on here, your library services, you can see are 22 points above the national average. Image and the appearance of the city are doing terrific. And even the maintenance appearance of your recreation and community centers, you can see is almost 20 points above the national average. So lots and lots of good news in this presentation. It continues on with your recreation programs. You can see are 53% above the national average. Your efforts to promote access, diversity, inclusiveness, which has been particularly important in the last couple of years. You see it's 69%, compared to just 40% nationally, and a number of other things on here, but you'll see where you're a little bit more in line is property maintenance codes for commercial properties. You're a little above the national average, but slightly below other mid-sized communities, and the same thing is true for the residential property maintenance codes. So when we look at public safety issue, I know this has been a top priority for the city. You're doing very well in pretty much all the areas that we assess. Want to highlight your fire services, which is 93% give positive ratings. Just incredible. Nationally, it's about 3 out of 4 at 76%. But your medical services is even a bigger gap. They're also at 93%, but the average is just 71%. And I also want to highlight your police services at 74%, nearly 3 out of 4 positive ratings compared to just a little over half in most communities around the country these days. So you can see that your feelings of safety, though, are just a little bit better than the national average. Efforts to prevent crime are a little better. And you see local traffic flows is actually below the national average for all cities and mid-sized cities. But I've noticed as I look into the data, one of the issues that's impacting perceptions of crime and even the safety is some of the issues of homelessness, which you've been addressing. And so part of that's contributing versus it isn't the lack of a quality police force, when you can see that in this chart, how much better they rate here than the rest of the nation. A few other things to share is just the overall perception when it comes to your transit system. 70%, almost double the national average of 37%. Your walking and biking paths are at 72%, which is 30%. I feel like a broken record on a lot of these, but I'll finally give you some ones that have opportunities for improvement. But even the condition and clarity of your street signs and even traffic flow, which is an issue, one of the reasons some people are concerned about traffic enforcement, is still 11% above the national average. One of the things I know is traffic flow is something you typically want to have as a problem. You know, nobody wants it, but cities where traffic flow is not an issue are usually dying. They're not places that people want to go. When it comes to condition of your streets and sidewalks, you can see you're about average, a little less than the mid-size, a little better than the national average. Same thing for the internet provider, and then the last one for planning for growth. You can kind of see you're in the middle there. So those are areas that tend to get a little bit more attention because you do so well. I think your residents expect a lot. So the areas that you're doing average in, if I want to call it that, are the areas that tend to get higher priority. Last thing I want to share with you, and this kind of rounds out my assessments today, is the overall value for taxes, city taxes and fees. Nobody likes to pay taxes, at least not most people. In fact, the national average is just 33%, but here in Tempe, it's 25% above that. And what that shows is even though people are paying taxes and they don't want to do that, they're getting good value. And you see that in the high ratings in so many areas of the city, so you're to be commended for that. You actually also collectively are in the top 10% of all cities. Again this year. You'll get the award sometime next year, but you met the requirements when it comes to overall value for taxes, your customer service, and overall quality of city services. Those are the 3 things we track. So congratulations for that. With that said, we did take a look at some of the trends. Overall, things stayed about the same. But when you're like a Kansas City fan with the Chiefs, you just expect to win the Super Bowl every year. It used to be the New England Patriots. Now I live in the terrible city that thinks it's going to be them. But anyway, of all the areas, 155 areas that were assessed, a little over 100 stayed about the same statistically. We saw 25 areas increase and 24 areas decrease. So for the most part, from last year to this year, it was another great year in most areas. Some of the areas that improved the most is I heard today that you expanded 311 service. It saw nearly 15% increase in satisfaction from a year ago. I also highlighted some of the solid waste because they just keep getting better and better. You can see solid waste is up 9.5% from last year. Your transit service, which is now 30 points above the national average, you can see went up another 8%. Feelings of safety at night, and as you work your way down, also in neighborhoods, are both up. Quality of new commercial development, your water conservation program, street lighting, and of course, the city elected officials was almost 7% compared to a year ago. So a lot of things are going in the right direction. Interestingly, for the areas that had the biggest decreases, most of these areas actually went up significantly last year, and they're still better than they were 2 years ago. So don't let that concern you. The overall quality of art programs has decreased 10%. but the ease of access to public meetings is actually ahead of where it was 2 years ago. Before and after school programs, your Tempe History Museums are also ahead of where they were 2 years ago, not to mention some of the issues related to your TempePublicLibrary.org and the Tempe Center for the Arts. They're also still ahead of where they were 2 years ago, along with the ease of access to boards and commissions. So we did see some things go down, but there are things that had really big spikes last year, so they've returned to a place that's still moving in the right direction. As far as priorities, one of the things we ask residents is what do they think the top issues are. I don't think this will be a surprise, but the issues related to folks who are experiencing homelessness is at the top of the list, followed by streets, police services, traffic safety, city infrastructure, and neighborhoods. And then there's a number of other things mentioned on this chart and the following chart. I won't read them all, but clearly those are the things that residents care the most about. We don't have an objective rating really for homelessness, so it doesn't show up in the next set of charts I'm going to show, but it is something I want to make sure I emphasize as being a priority for residents. When it comes to the way residents rate services, and we look at the importance of those services compared to the rating residents give, you'll see the condition of streets is actually the biggest opportunity for improvement. It's the only item labeled as a high priority. In the city of Tempe, we have other categories like very high priority and urgent priority. You don't even have those on your chart, but you can see it's the most important service. It was ranked 14th, and so that is one thing that residents are noticing. Not cheap to address that though, so that's one of the things to keep in mind. But you will see below that traffic safety, police service, alley maintenance, and continued economic and business development in neighborhoods kind of round out the top opportunities for improvement moving forward. In addition to the performance-related items, we also have some other questions, one of which focuses on your customer service. And I think this is one of the reasons your customer service ratings are so much better than the national average, is because people who've actually experienced have great experiences. 44% of the people who contacted this, or of all residents, 44% contacted the city last year. Look at these ratings on the right side of 90% and better. 96% thought the city employees were honest. 96% thought they were treated fairly. Goes all the way down to being treated in a timely manner. 18% said their needs weren't met, but frankly, the national average for that runs around 35 to 40%. Sometimes you're not going to make someone who calls happy because you just can't go back and do something that maybe they should have done for them. But at the end of the day, tremendous ratings. And again, I think one of the reasons your overall ratings are so high is you have such great employees. In addition, when it comes to where people get information, the city website, water bill, and city mailings are the top 3 sources. All of them are used by at least 50% or more of the residents. And when we asked people how they can use this data better a few years ago, one of the things was to create a dashboard for you. So I'm not going to do the interactive dashboard today, but I do have a couple slides in here. If you haven't used it, this is available. It's actually on your webpage, and you can go in and drill down and see maps. You can see trends and a number of other things. A couple examples I have here now, just to give you an idea if you want to see the long-term trends. I guess here's another one. Today when I was meeting with your staff, I was helping them drill down into the data. So I said, hey, let's take a look at some safety questions. So we pulled up overall feeling of safety in the city, which went up a whopping 1.39% from last year. So you see that and you're like, huh, that doesn't seem like a real big change. But if you actually look at the character areas, look, in Papago was up almost 30%, and the Diablo area was 26%. So those are 2 areas you've been focusing on. Residents in those areas clearly noticed that. Some of the other neighborhoods or character areas didn't see it as much. As a result, you don't see the overall impact. Also, those are lesser populated areas, so they didn't count as much in the overall rating. But without this map, you don't actually realize what a big impact you're having, and you truly did. We also saw that on the next slide, which is efforts to prevent crime. You take a look at Papago and North Tempe was up 32%. Compared to a year ago. And again, the overall rating was up 4.36, which didn't get any acclaim when I was showing you trends, but when you actually break it down, it really shows that some of the areas you're targeting is having a big difference. So I'll continue on to the next couple slides. They were just to show you this is the trend that you can find. You can pick up any question on the survey and actually see the data all the way back to 2016. And on the next chart, I think is just another example. On the next slide, I guess it's back to me, showing some of the changes. This really shows the Mill Avenue area, perceptions of safety at nighttime, time. Similar to what the charts I just showed you, you can see it was up 14.3%, even though overall it increased by less than 1%. The people who live in the Mill Avenue Emerald area definitely have noticed some of the changes, particularly when it comes to perceptions of safety at night. So those are some of the highlights from the resident survey. When it comes to the employee survey, as I mentioned earlier, we do this every other year, and it's really to kind of have the same function as the community survey, but to get objective input from employees to kind of make sure that the working environment is healthy, that you're moving in the right direction so you can retain your quality employees and see what you need to do to make sure things are even better. We also have some comparative data here as well. What was especially unique this year is the city put an all-court press to get folks to participate. You had 1,321 employees, almost 70% of your employees. Typically, I consider for a city the size of Tempe a 50% response rate to be good. This was truly incredible. The margin of error with that many employees responding is less than 2% at the 95% level of confidence. And we gave employees multiple ways to respond. I think the city even provided some incentives to encourage participation. So this is one of the best response rates for a city of this size that I've seen, particularly in recent years. As far as the results for the employee survey, one of the first highlights is that overall satisfaction significantly above the national average. 87% for Tempe. Nationally, it's just 67%, so a 20% gap, which is terrific. We then go through a number of the statements of agreement just to see how things stack up when it comes to how coworkers treat one another with respect and how immediate supervisors treat their employees with respect. You can see double digits. In fact, it's 90% of coworkers think their other coworkers treat them with respect compared to just 2 out of 3 in other cities, and nearly 9 out of 10 for immediate supervisors compared to 2 out of 3 with most other communities. Employees feel safe at work. They feel that their work is appreciated by their immediate supervisor. They generally have the materials they need to do their job, and they even get information in a fairly timely manner. So these areas were all really big strengths for the city. And when it comes to retraining, you can also see that was 11% higher than the national average. The city's health care plan rated 10% above the national average. And one of the things that stood out the most to me was this one: I'm encouraged to be innovative and come up with better ways to do things at work. 15%. I think that's a good reason that your residents think the city does such a good job, is because your employees are actually making things better all the time. You'll see some of the areas that rated more average. The director, chief, and deputy directors, assistant chiefs use input from employees, some opportunities to do better there. A perception that poor job performance is dealt with effectively is now about average, but that's one of the areas that had the biggest improvement from the last survey. And the perception of people are paid fairly for what the work they do is a little bit above the national average. One thing I do want to highlight out of this is just the trends in engagement. I reported a couple years ago that we'd seen the decrease here in Tempe from 60 to 53, which was similar to national trends tracked by Gallup and others. But you can see the national trend has stayed about the same, has not improved, whereas Tempe's gone up nearly 15 points to 68%. So there's some really great things going on within your employee workforce to even make employees sense that they're more engaged than ever. As far as the trends, there were 64 areas assessed in 2022, and again this year. Too many positives for me to list, but you can see things that the level of employee engagement, you can see the programs for professional development and career mobility, taking care of poor job performance. That's one of the biggest areas. It was also when you're now average, but you were significantly below last time. Overall satisfaction with professional development, the believing that exceptional job performance is recognized appropriately, thinking that employees in your department are highly motivated, having someone there who to help you encourage your career and also be your mentor, and then finally just being encouraged to be innovative. As I mentioned before, all those areas have just increased significantly. And I only list, remember, the 59 of these actually improved, so we'd be here all night if I kept going through the list. As far as the decreases, there weren't many. There were just 5. Only 2 were more than 2%. First was the amount of leave that people receive each year, and then the second was the amount that people pay for health care benefits. Remember, nationally, your ratings are still better, but it has dropped slightly from the last survey. And then you can see perceptions that people are reasonably compensated. the healthcare plan meeting people's needs, and the amount people are paid being fair for the work they do. Those were all down by just a little over 1%. But all in all of the issues that went down were actually related to compensation and benefits, and that's actually not uncommon right now with the national survey and research that we've done. So this survey as well, there's a dashboard. I'm not going to go too much into depth, but you can find the same information here. It actually allows you to drill down by department. It even lets department leaders take a look at what are the gaps or the differences that make satisfied employees compared to people who are dissatisfied. What are those differences? We have correlation coefficient, little meters in there. You can figure out what's really driving overall satisfaction, and hopefully this will be a great tool. Here's just an example of where you can see a breakdown for a single question for all the departments. This is overall satisfaction with people's current job. You can see all departments are above 70%, and you can see some of them are well above 90% satisfaction. And then you can see the breakdowns differently based on the years that employees have worked here. You can see, interestingly, the happiest employees are the ones who just started within the last 3 years. So, but you see 80% are above in pretty much all the areas. The other thing is, if you want to be able to see some of the differences based on departments, we've got some tools here where you can see compare by topic, where you see the major categories, but it also allows you to look down for every single question and see whether or not there's something unique about your department that maybe is setting the standard for the city that others could benchmark or copy, or perhaps you have something that's different in your department that you didn't even know about. So it's designed to help support that. But all in all, this is another great year. The community survey really overall stayed about the same compared to last year, but it's another winning year. You're once again in the top 10% of all cities that we survey in the country, and you're continuing to move forward in key areas, particularly leadership was one of the most significant improvements this year. But with that said, the issue related to homelessness, your traffic enforcement of your traffic laws and condition of streets are 3 areas I think you want to continue paying attention to. And when we come to the employee survey, it's a blessing that you have a city that rates 20% above the national average in overall job satisfaction. Employee engagement is up, and overall 59 out of 64 areas have improved, with the 5 decreases being relatively small and all being related to compensation and benefits, which is pretty typical of what other communities have experienced. So with that, Mayor, that completes my presentation. I think we're going to continue. Yeah, we can stop here for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation. I've got a couple of folks here in the queue. So first of all, Vice Mayor Garland.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that you come out here and give us this information directly to tell us a little bit more about the surveys. I just want to say congratulations to our city manager, because I think a lot of the changes and a lot of the employee improvement is due to some of the things that she's brought on, and all the staff that you have working underneath you, Rosa. So thank you so much for that. I want to say on, I can't remember what page it was. Let me see if I got it on my computer. But when you talked about the things that the city of Tempe is looking at, the things that we need to improve on, homelessness, we know that's really important, and that's near and dear to all of our hearts that we're all working on. Condition of the streets, we just got a bond passed, so we're going to be able to address that number 2, and hopefully you won't see that at all in a few years, because we're going to be really focusing on that. Police services, definitely something that's really important to us. And then again, Vision Zero, and the city of Tempe received a $12.5 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to work on Vision Zero. So I think that is another one of those top 4 things that we can address, immediately with all the things that we want to continue to do. So thank you so much for the time that you put into getting this survey for us. It's really important for us to be able to have this. I just want to say thank you. You guys did a great job.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice Mayor Garland. Next up, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you for the survey. As someone that's participated in these surveys for over 30 years, I have some thoughts that I want to point out. First of all, the fact that we were able to get over 1,000 surveys done by our residents when our goal was 800, I mean, that's incredible. That's a lot, because people typically, they don't want to participate. So this is very impressive. So you're doing a great job reaching out to our residents, and I'd like to see that continue. And because obviously I'm a statistical nerd, so the more the sample size is, the better the reliability is to it. So overall quality of services is 85%. That really resonates with me. When the national average is only 49%, I mean, we're 36% above the national average. So what we are doing is working. And we always have people that complain about certain things or whatever. And that's okay. I like to get everybody a seat at the table, but 85%. I mean, that's very a solid number and quite impressive. Safety has improved. That's an important point that I like to make. Transit is one of my biggest passions, and we're 33% above average. In fact, Tempe has the best transportation program in the valley. So that's great news. And we're one of the top 10 cities in all the cities in the United States. Very good. Safety and great streets is another one of my passions, and we're doing well in that. I would point out that I'm glad that we're having lots of good results in North Tempe. South Tempe did go down a little, so maybe we need to kind of look at that, just visit what happened down there that they went down. So I'd like some follow-up on that if I could. Another 69% of employees participated in the employee survey. That is a significant change. And I don't know back in the day, I mean, it's big, because when I worked here, a lot of people were scared to take the surveys because there was a trust issue, and they were worried if they told the truth that there'd be a problem. And that is not happening with 69% of employees participating. I was always trying to get people to take the surveys, right, to get the information out there so you can make accurate decisions. But this is a marked change and very statistically significant. I want to congratulate our new management team. I'm all about stats, as I said, and this is hard evidence that what we are doing is working. What we are doing is working. Very important. We are on the right direction. We can prove it statistically. I love the data-driven approach, and so thank you so much for this excellent presentation and this excellent these surveys. Appreciate it. And welcome to Arizona again for your what, 30th time or so. Yeah, thank you. Good to see you again.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Adams. I was going to say, yeah, you do have a very high rate of participation. I think you could start polling Iowa, perhaps. So let's see. Next up, let's go to Councilmember Amberg.
I leaned over to Rosa, Mr. Mayor, and it was like when I saw the changes between 2020, 2022, and 2024, and I looked at her and I was like, well, there was one really big change between 2022 and 2024, and that was Rosa and her new management team. So kudos to you guys. You know, I know a lot of that has to do with you, and I am so appreciative that I get to work with you and your team. I'm going to go a little speculation here because it's been like, you know, my experience that most people that answer these type of surveys are the ones that are unhappy. The people that are really happy with what's going on are like, hey, everything's fine. I don't really have time. I want to watch TV. I'm not going to answer the survey. So for me, if that actually did occur a little bit on this, so I'm in the back of my mind, I'm going to go to bed even with a bigger smile because I think the numbers are probably even a little bit better. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Councilmember Hodge.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to say, why couldn't we have this a week earlier so we could have bragged while we were in Tampa? Yeah, you did. Well, I did anyway. I'm going to say we're the best.
Councilmember,
anyway, but
usually you go after this presentation. The scheduling was
I
different
know,
this year. So
I just would have loved to just slap it in their face with some data points.
it's all right.
But it's great. Everybody, echoing what everybody said, it's from the city manager down. Everyone had a part in this. Every single person. I'm not going to go into stats and data because I think my colleagues have done it, but I want to bring up something special when I want to talk about what's going on with our police department, because police is always a hot topic. And it's always a topic that is always mostly negative, right? You never see the positive. But in our residents in our city are seeing the effect of what Tempe Police does. They care. And when we see a problem, we're not afraid to fix it and go on it heads on. And I just want to give credit to that because we have the best fire department in the world. And we do have the best police department who is, with all that's going on in this world, is trying to work towards making people feel secure with police. And that means every neighborhood, every area, because there's some people who trust, some people who don't. So Chief McCoy, I want to give you a heads. That's why I want to say to you, because you have been very, very visual in the community and people notice it. So it does come from the bottom down, top down. And I'm just saying for you and your police department, continue on the good work and thank you for all that you do. And you know, Fire, we love you. I spent a lot of time with you guys, so I love you guys a lot. Just thank you for all the good work within everybody, every person who's an employee in our city. This is a time for you guys to bow. We're happy because we're a part of it, but it's your work that has made this possible. So thank you for every person who's sitting in this room today on all the hard work you made our city proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hodge. Councilmember Chin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few, I won't repeat what my colleagues have shared. I agree with them, but I wanted to stress a couple of points. First, I'd like to thank our city manager and our city management team and all of the directors. As I was listening to you, I was trying to make eye contact, and some of you who avoid my eye contact usually, and some who were on board. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the employees for participating. Thank you to the residents for participating. Often when I speak with residents, groups of residents, have served on different panels, I'm often asked, how do we help? How do we help? And this is from residents, and I let them know that we often send out surveys. We want to know what they're thinking, and we want their feedback. And I think it's great that we surpassed our goal in participation. I think that's important for people to know that we're paying attention. It felt a little like parent-teacher conferences. I was a little nervous as I was reading it, but it was all great. It was exciting to see the progress in the areas and the work. You can see the results of the work that we've done. I also look for the opportunities. I look forward to working with my council colleagues and the staff to work on those opportunities. But thank you. And for many reasons, thank you to the state of Kansas this week.
Thank you. Councilmember, yes, Councilmember Hodge?
I just want to give a special thank you to a person who I believe keeps us as council together. Whenever we need something, she's always there with her big bag in her hand to make sure we have everything we need. Thank you so much, Tanya Chavez. You're the best chief of staff in the whole wide world.
All right, let's see. All right, anyone, any other further comments or questions? All right, I'll repeat everyone said everything I would have said. So once again, thank you for everything, and thank you to all the staff for everything you do, and thank you to our residents for taking a very active role in participating in that survey, as well as our employees. So with that, I will move on then to...
Excuse me, Mayor, just a couple other items just to wrap up our presentation before
Sorry, I thought you were done.
Before we let Chris go on his way. I know you're very excited. Just a couple notes about next steps, especially not only with the community survey, we love to use the data for actionable items. You can see the results for the strategies that have been put in place. We are also putting that same emphasis on the employee survey. And so the employee survey does relate to several performance measures. So one of the things that we're doing this year is we are putting together an action team. And first and foremost, Chris will be meeting with all of our department leadership teams starting in January to take a deeper dive in regards to the analysis of the department level data. And so that will help each department really have a customized focus. And then strategic management and innovation will be facilitating a team for a citywide focus of actions and strategies to help support movement where we do have areas of opportunity and also just continue to do good work for our employees. One of the things about that team is that it's going to be inclusive, all levels of the organization, and I would be remiss in not thanking our employee groups as well as our affinity groups because they were key in helping to give strong nudges to employees to help participate in the survey to get that 69%. Previous year it was at 37.2%. So we're very happy about that. But most importantly, they were helpful in the construct of the survey instrument, the way that we were going to approach our open-ended comments. So their engagement has been incredible. And I'd like to thank Chris because this is his fourth presentation of the day. We had over, I think, 350 employees at our 2 o'clock session, and then we also had some special sessions at 10 and noon this morning. So he's had a very long day of sharing all of this information and clarifying questions for all of our team here. So really want to thank him for that. So thank you. One of the ways that we increased employee participation is we did an opt-in raffle, and I want to announce that Officer Joe Guato from our bike squad and our police department won a one-night stay at Canopy Hilton and a gift certificate to Perfect Pair Bistro here in the downtown area, and that was compliments of coordination with Tempe Tourism. So Michael Martin and his team helped us with that. And with that, just if you have any questions, if your aides have questions, we're happy to support information about the employee and the community surveys, and especially as we also prepare next year for incorporating our business survey. So with that, I'll conclude, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Adams?
I just
Sorry.
Sorry.
Just one more thing. I'm so glad that we're doing this with employees, because when employees are treated well and they're happy at work, they make happy constituents, right? Because they're motivated to solving the problems. And I can't tell you how many different departments in the city solve the issues. And it's no longer this, like, I'll get back to you in a month. It's, we'll get back to you right away. And so that helps us as council members, because they know that the constituents know that we're advocating for what their needs are. And that is happening on an incredibly rapid basis. So you bringing the employees into this this participation, it's one of the reasons we have a great organization, and we do have great employees out there. Yes, and I want to thank all of the employees in this room and those that are watching on TV, because I'm sure they're all staring at the TV tonight while watching Channel 11. But anyway, I'm really thankful to the employees and to what you two are doing.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hodge?
Okay, I'm very competitive. How are we going to get the word out? I want everybody to know. I mean, I know it's going to be on our website, but are we have any specific things we're going to just spread out to make sure that that the city knows? Is it going to be in a water bill? What are we doing to make sure that our city knows that what type of city they're living in?
So we work very closely with Chris Baxter and her communications and marketing team, and so we will be releasing this information. We also integrate it into stories about the work that we're doing, including where we're struggling and want support and cooperation and co-design from our community members. And so we do integrate this throughout the entire year. I also know that I would just invite the public in regards to some of the highlights that you as council members share on your social media sites, as well as I know the mayor with the state of the city. Chris already has some information she'd like to share, not only just the good, but some of the opportunities that we have to improve for our city. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else any further comments or questions? All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Appreciate the presentation. Great job.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 3B, which Whitell is going to stay with us for, which is the Strategic Management Update, Performance-Led Budgeting and Strategy Tool for Aligning Resources for Tempe Processes, otherwise known as the START tool. So Whitell, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, again, good evening, Mayor and Council. Whitell Holmes, Director of Strategic Management and Innovation Office. And while the START tool is quite a long verbiage for an acronym, that's kind of the focus of our presentation tonight. Mainly, I want to get a touch base a little bit on our performance measures, which we operationalize your City Council 5 strategic priorities. Introduce a little bit about the performance-led budgeting and some of the asks that we have you of council in regards to getting us started and aligning those resources, and then do a quick check-in in regards to the acceleration models that you identified for 24-25 during this process last year. With that, for the performance measures, just a few things to highlight. The items in green are some of the new measures, so we either had them as brand new or that they were placeholders. So working with our department teams, they are now built-out measures. I would like to highlight specifically a few innovative ones, such as our park ecosystem health. That's going to be looking at our balanced tree species, the diversity and richness, as well of our water management, and also our soil conditions. So that is a first-of-a-kind type of performance measure that we're leading the way in establishing refreshing. Also, water efficiency, focusing on our commercial and residential customers that engage with our water conservation programs and consultations, that they actually realize an efficiency as a result of that. We do have a placeholder right now working with Transportation Sustainability Team regarding urban cooling, so I'm looking forward to coming back to council with that. And then also our diversity supplier program, we have now built that measure out to measure basically the percentage of our historically underutilized businesses that receive contracted spends with us as a city. And that would be typically women-owned business, minority-owned business, or veteran-owned businesses. And then a big one is really trying to figure out in a very difficult way how to assess how we're managing our risk in the organization and the total cost of that risk. So this started a couple of years ago, and it took some research and also a lot of engagement with our team, and they were very open to exploring different ideas on how we can track either progress or areas of opportunity regarding our risk management. We are retiring a few performance measures. Those are highlighted in blue, and those are ones that are being incorporated as strategies or other components for some other measures that have already been built out. And then finally, strategic management is both an art and a science, and methodologies and benchmarks, best in class, tend to change over time. And so we're always trying to adapt and be nimble with that. So you'll see some changes in your packet in regarding to some performance measures, and they've only changed because a benchmark has changed. Or we've also maybe perhaps clarified the statements so that it's easier to understand for our public and for our employees. And so with that, I'd like to move forward to our performance-led budgeting. This is our strategy tool for aligning resources for Tempe. This is really your opportunity to provide staff early direction. It is not an allocation of funding as we move into the budget cycle, so I just want to emphasize that a few times, if I may. We will come back to council once you have prioritized for staff and given us that early hyper-focused direction. We will come back with acceleration strategies. We collaborate across departments and agencies with a focus on shifting resources or elevating or scaling or even changing strategies. And then all of that information that you provide us from the START tool results will inform our capital improvement program as well as our operating budget. Just as a reminder, there's a few parameters. You get a theoretical $100, not $101, but $100. And you do have a minimum distribution of 10. You can distribute 13 dollars to a performance measure, but no lower than 10. And your maximum distribution is 30. So our algorithm helps us come back to you to narrow the focus of priorities here for us as an organization. I'd like to thank your council assistants. They've all participated in a training so that if you have questions, they can help you, as well as Kimberly Sotelo, the Senior Management Assistant for the City Manager's Office. She will give you some kind nudges if we're seeing that you haven't completed the tool. And we do have a shorter timeline than we've had in previous years. And I do, Councilmember Hodge, blame that on the NLC conference. So now we're kind of, instead of you completing this tool while you're trying to manage everything at a conference and represent Tempe, you actually get to do that now from the comfort of your homes. This is just an illustration of the START tool. You'll be able to track, like so for item number 1, it'll be able to track your distribution across the performance measures. You also will be able to see what you've allocated, or actually not allocated, distributed as far as an equivalent points to the performance measure. And then importantly, you'll be able to see if the performance measure is meeting target or if it's been accelerated. And then obviously there's a link to our performance measure portal at performance.tempe.gov that can take you to more details about each of the performance measures. Again, this is not an allocation or an appropriation of funding. It is just a tool to give us an early conversation. I do have one change just to note for you for this year. Because we want to be as transparent and your responses to the START tool are part of the public record, when we return in December with the results, we will actually return with documentation that shows what you allocated towards. So it will show what points or dollars you distributed across the performance measures. So just want to remind you of that. We want to make sure that we're open and transparent to our public. And so we will also be going back to some historic records and making sure that that data is out there as well. So just kind of shoring up some housekeeping on that. And then finally, in your packet, you have a lot of reference information, including the presentation that Chris Tatham gave tonight about the employee survey and the community survey. You've also got the interactive tools at your disposal. And then I'll give you quickly here an update on accelerated performance measures. And then one key item to maybe kind of, I call it the Reader's Digest cheat sheet, is we've aligned the performance measures that relate to the items of least satisfaction but highest importance for our community and our employee and our businesses. We've aligned those in your points of emphasis document in your packet. And then again, when we meet with, after we have direction from you, we'll meet with our departments and our strategy partners on collaboration and shifting resources to really achieve the top priorities, even, I guess, the higher top priorities for you as council. And just a quick update in regards to the performance measures that were established last year for fiscal year 24-25, pavement quality index, we're very pleased to know that in anticipation of in the event that the bond should pass in the election, staff have already started coordinating contracts and sequencing events so that we're really optimizing the work on all of the road improvements that will be made over the next 5 years. And that will also help us achieve not only our goal of 70, but an excellent goal of 72 in 5 years versus in 12 years. And the other thing that I would like to just acknowledge is that the team has been making sure that preservation projects are staying in place, as well as focusing on our residential PQI. And so I'm really looking forward to next year's survey. I believe we will probably see a little bit of drop because we'll be working on all of these areas of importance for the community in regards to our roadways. And then I would think within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see another increase again. So very excited about where we're moving towards that. Oops. A little too quick there. Let me make sure I got the right one. So another item, performance measure that was accelerated for 24-25 was in regards to ending homelessness. The green tells the story. We've had significant decreases in our winter point in time count, as well as in the past 2 years during our summer point in time counts. And part of this is attributed to some of the strategies in increasing our graduates from Tempe Works, as well as who we are able to house. And then one of the items that I think is of note is that instead of a 1 to 25 case management program, the team has been able to establish a 1 to 20. So that means there's a case manager for every 20 clients in our service program. And so we're just very pleased with that. And we still encourage our community to report encampments so that we can get service to those most in need as quickly as possible. And we have our online survey tool to do that. Property code enforcement, that was some of the items that Chris mentioned in the in the community survey. One of the things that I'm very impressed with about this team is they have created dashboards so that they can adjust their work. They utilize a GIS map to see where are their challenges coming in across the city, and then they adjust the zones that they're covering with their inspectors. And so I think that's important to know that not only are we as city leadership utilizing data for actions, our frontline team is utilizing data to inform their day-to-day, their week-to-week, and to achieve their monthly targets and their goals. The other thing too is sometimes I look at the hard sciences like the data, but one of the other soft sciences that our code enforcement team is deploying is really meeting twice. They've met at least twice since July 1st with our HOA leadership and the homeowners associations. And so I think that's important to note that they're engaging with the community in order to get more information to see how they can better serve our neighborhoods. A feeling of safety in the city. We've had several quarters where we are achieving target. This is one of the measures that there was a methodology change, so some of the historic data we are adjusting in regards to that. And the reason the methodology is important is that we want to compare ourselves to comparable cities. So we don't want to just say we're doing better one quarter than the next for just Tempe. We want to see how we're making Tempe really a great destination, both locally and nationally. And some of the points that I'd like to emphasize here is really a surgence with our crime-free multi-housing participant program. That's a certification program, as well as our beat officers coordinating with our neighborhood associations. And I believe that those are some of the key strategies that have moved towards this. And then I would be remiss without mentioning the operationalization of our real-time ops center that you all celebrated and toured. Thank you. And then finally, the fifth acceleration measure was our employee turnover. And there are some key highlights there, a lot that I am going to refer to my notes on because I think there's some things I want to make sure I get completely right. Not only are we on board to increase our new employee onboard completion rate to 80%, we are actually currently at 75% towards our target. and we're still very early in the year. And then also our individual quality improvement program. And I think when you talk about somebody cares about my career, somebody is mentoring me at work, that's where some of that activity takes place. And we've had an 11% increase from last year in regards to the utilization of the IQIP. So really compliment not only our employee development team for making sure that those resources are available and understandable, but for all of our teams, that individual employees and supervisors that adopt that tool. And then finally, our compensation classification program study is in place and in progress. And so I believe that that will also give us some more data on how do we meet some of the needs and some of the gaps that we saw with the 5 items that decreased from last year, and they also are decreasing nationally. So we want to look at employee compensation and leave programs and things like that. So I think it's a holistic approach to reducing employee turnover. And then finally, again, I said I came with an ask of council. So we received a lot of the results from the survey in October, worked with Chris Tatham and team to get everything ready. And so tonight you are actually going to be receiving the START tool tomorrow morning. Kimberly Sotelo will hit the magic button and you will get that in your inbox. Use your regular login to access the tool. And I ask that you have that completed by November 26th so that we're prepared to come back to you with accurate information on December 12th and share the results. And then you can provide us direction on what you want us to do in regards to what do you want us to prioritize over the next year. I do want to also share that one of the things we implemented for the acceleration models last year was our Tempe Acceleration Program team. And I was very pleased to have Mary Maisie run that team. And I think that kept focus on the strategies that each area was working on with their strategy partners to move these acceleration models forward. And so I just wanted to make sure I made a public thank you of that, because I think that is also a cultural and a behavior difference that we make as an organization to achieve these outcomes that we're celebrating tonight. With that, I'm available for questions or support. Just let me know how we may help.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for the presentation. Council, any comments or questions on the START tool? Yes, Vice Mayor Garland?
I will have mine done tomorrow night.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Garland.
Got one.
Yes, Councilmember Hodge?
I'll have mine done before hers tomorrow.
Okay.
It's a challenge.
The gauntlet has been thrown, and we will track that. We will track that for you and let you know who wins. It will probably open just shortly after 8:30 tomorrow morning. So, right, it's like buying tickets for a concert, right?
All right. Anybody,
Well,
anyone
thank
else?
you.
Any further comments or any other arm wrestling needs to take place up here? All right. Sounds
Thank you.
good. Thank you, Waddell. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. That brings me to item 3C, which is our long-range financial forecast update. Hi, Lisette. Hi, Julie.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Lisette Camacho, Deputy City Manager. With me today is Julie Hyder. She's our interim municipal budget director. She's only been in this role for about a month, but she has worked for the city for 27 years. She does have direct experience with budgeting and capital planning through her work at Public Works and also Community Services. This is our first presentation to kick off the fiscal year 2026 budget development. We'll present the second long-range forecast in February. And some key takeaways from this presentation is that the overall economy remains relatively stable, but we are seeing a slowdown in local sales tax revenues. We have a couple of slides on local sales tax later on in this presentation, and we'll provide additional information at that time. All other revenues, including building and trades, cultural and recreation fees, and interest income are outperforming budget. With that in mind, the forecast does not anticipate a recession or other major economic downturn. This is consistent with the information from our forecast partners, including the Eller College of Management Forecasting Project and the Arizona Finance Advisory Committee. All of the major funds are within their fund balance policy throughout the forecast period. And before I turn over the presentation to Julie, I wanted to recognize the work of our budget team. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes to prepare the forecast before you today. And I wanted to thank Lori Osakowski, Scott Gruber, Kevin DiDomenico, Carrie Taylor, and Benicia Benson. And with that, I'll turn over the presentation to Julie.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Today's presentation of the long-range financial forecast directly aligns with the council's strategic priority, financial stability of the city. The goal is to maintain the highest general obligation bond rating by keeping the general fund within fund balance policy levels.
Julie, can you adjust your microphone?
Yes, thank you. The specific performance measures are 5.04 and 5.05. As we start the fiscal year 2026 budget process, I would like to briefly review the public meeting dates for both the capital and operating budgets. We'll begin the public forums in February, leading into March. Also in February, we'll introduce the proposed capital projects along with an updated long-range forecast. The initial recommended capital projects will be presented in March. We have 2 budget review sessions. Thank you. We have 2 budget review sessions planned, one in April and another in May if needed. The tentative budget adoption is scheduled for May 22nd, followed by final adoption on June 5th, and adoption of the property tax levy on July 1st. And now I will turn the presentation back over to Lisette.
So this slide covers the forecast assumptions for all the major funds. As I mentioned earlier, the overall economy remains relatively stable. We are seeing lower sales tax revenues. Throughout the forecast period, we did adjust and lower local tax revenues. The remaining 5 bullet items on this slide is consistent with the forecast that we presented back in February. The long-range forecast does include the elimination of residential rental tax collection that will become effective this January. It also includes a reduction in state shared revenue distributions due to decreases in state income and corporate tax collections. For state shared income tax, the revenues that we forecast is based on collections from 2 years ago, so we know exactly what we'll receive in fiscal year 25. We are continuing to see strong building and trade revenues, and the increased investment earnings due to higher interest rates are offsetting the lower sales tax revenues that we're seeing. The long-range forecast also includes the provisions for the impact of the comprehensive classification and compensation study that is happening right now. As I mentioned, only the local taxes had been adjusted lower to reflect current year-to-date actual revenue trends. We are recommending to continue the budget balancing efforts that were introduced back in February to continue with no recurring and non-recurring supplementals in the general fund for 2 more years. We saw the passage of Proposition 479, which extends the half-cent sales tax for transit. Julie will talk more about the transit fund, but we're also going to look at long-term budget balancing measures in this fund because over the long-range forecast, you're seeing large annual losses within the fund. This chart before you is a chart of the monthly sales tax collections beginning in July of 2020, and we have information through September 2024. As you can see, monthly collections of sales tax revenue fluctuates on a month-to-month basis, but if you trend that out, what you'll have is the dotted blue line on this chart. I want to point you to the right of the chart, and as you can see, beginning in March 2024, local sales tax are performing below the trend. We've seen that over the last 6 to 8 months. Continuing to closely monitor this, and this is not something that's unique to Tempe. The lower sales tax revenues that we're seeing in other cities as well. This chart in front of you is the annual year-over-year increases in sales tax revenues for other cities. We looked at 5 neighboring cities. As you can see, Tempe is in the green, and I wanted to point out that Mesa and Scottsdale. Mesa is in the gray and Scottsdale is in the light blue. You'll see that their sales tax revenues for fiscal year 2024 is very similar to Tempe. We had flat revenues, meaning fiscal year 24 revenues is about the same as what we collected in fiscal year 2023. This slide is just a reminder that residential rental sales tax is eliminated for fiscal year 2025. You see a half-year impact. The total impact across the three funds that rely on this revenue source is $10 million, with the largest component going to the general fund at $6.6 million. Beginning in fiscal year 2026, we'll have a full year impact of the reduction in sales tax revenues, totaling about $21 million, with the impact to the general fund of about $14 million. I'm going to spend a little bit of time in this chart right here. You're familiar with this chart. You've seen this interactive modeling tool every time you present the long-range forecast. The chart on the top left is the revenues and expenditures. The red line is your expenditures, and the blue line is your revenues. The chart on the right is the forecast for where unassigned fund balance will end on an annual basis throughout the forecast period. I'm going to go over the middle section of the chart. I will let you know that for fiscal year 23-24, we ended with a fund balance of 37%, or about $120 million. Even though we had flat sales tax revenues in the general fund, we did beat our forecast. Back in February, we were forecasting fund balance at 34%. Reason for that is expenditures came in lower than what we forecasted, and as I mentioned earlier, other revenues beat our forecast. So essentially in fiscal year 23-24, we added back to our fund balance about $11 million. Beginning in fiscal year 25 through fiscal year 29, those are estimates or projected amounts. We did include the we did reduce the forecast for the local sales tax to reflect current year-to-date trend. The forecast also includes the elimination of the residential rental sales tax collection, includes the budget impact for the classification and compensation study beginning in fiscal year 2026. And as I mentioned, we're going to continue to closely monitor sales tax collections and other revenues. And if local tax revenues and the other revenues I mentioned go down, we'll introduce new budget balancing measures in the February forecast. I've covered most of this, and I'll turn over the presentation to Julie to go over the special revenue funds and the enterprise funds.
Thank you. As Lisette mentioned earlier, the funds are stable. The water, wastewater, and solid waste funds are stable, with fund balance remaining within policy throughout the forecast period. Revenue amounts reflect anticipated future rate adjustments. The Emergency Medical Transport, or Ambulance Fund, also continues to have a stable outlook, with revenue increases since inception of the fund. The forecast includes recurring capital budget to maintain the ambulance fleet. And fund balance policy for this fund is still in progress as we continue working with the Fire Medical Rescue Department to refine the policy. Moving on to the special revenue funds, starting with the Transit Fund. Also, as Lisette mentioned earlier, the passage of Proposition 479, which extends the half-cent sales tax for transportation, is expected to increase regional funding in this fund. Despite this increase in funding, the elimination of residential rental sales tax, combined with increasing operational costs, result in significant annual losses and will require budget balancing measures to ensure the future stability of the fund. The transportation staff is on top of this, and they have been working with an independent consultant to perform an analysis of the fund revenue, and the results will be shared with council at a March work study session. Moving on to the Transportation, or HERF Fund, this fund receives the majority of its funding from the distribution of state-shared highway user revenue funds. Revenue projections are based on the projections from the Department of Transportation, as well as year-to-date activity. Fund balance remains within policy throughout the forecast period. As Mayor and Council are aware, future HERF revenues are subject to legislation, and they may increase or decrease the amount the city receives. We continue to monitor any pending legislation. Finally, the Arts and Culture Fund, despite the loss of residential rental sales tax, The Arts and Culture Fund remains stable with revenue projections consistent with the February 2024 forecast. Fund balance remains above policy level throughout the forecast period. And Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate the presentation. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, Julie, if I can, thank you, by the way. It's great to see you again. For the transit tax, we're going to lose about $6 million because of the rental tax, correct?
Correct.
So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not only hitting, our general fund.
Correct.
It's going to hit our transit fund. So I just want to, it's this rental tax decision was really hard on us as a city, and it will keep being hard on us in numerous different areas. So thank you for the excellent presentation, and appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Anyone else, any comments or questions on the budget? Or I should say financial forecast, just to be clear. So, all right. Sounds good. Hearing none of, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Wonderful. Next up, item 3D, Public Art Plan Update, and that will be Craig Hayden and Rebecca Rothman. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Craig Hayden, Community Services Director. I'm joined by Rebecca Bloom-Rothman, our Manager of Public Art in Tempe. We are here looking forward to providing a quick overview of where we're headed with our public art plan. We've got a long history, decades old, 3 decades plus, of delivering public art projects in Tempe, and we have a great opportunity now to really solidify what we've done and look to the future with some great opportunities. So with that, before I turn the presentation over to Rebecca, we're going to provide a little bit of background information on public art in Tempe, what the plan is and where it's headed. I'll introduce the consultant team that we're working with that has national experience combined with our local knowledge. We've got a great team that we've put together. And then a public art plan wouldn't be public without community engagement and outreach, and we're really excited for the opportunities for the public to connect through this process. And then finally, we'll share some of the things that we've accomplished so far, what we're currently working on, and then also where we're headed with some of the next steps. With that, we do want to frame the public art program within Performance Measure 3.17. It's a key component of some of the programs that we offer within community services as we really look to increase the quality of life within Tempe. But we know this is the primary area where it sits, but there are so many other performance measures that it actually does impact positively, as well as we really look to provide some significant improvements throughout the city. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Hello, thank you. Thanks, Craig. So something that public art does in a really unique way here in Tempe is it creates creative landmarks and community identifications that people may or may not recognize as being artworks, but part of the built environment. In complementing that built environment, it also promotes an artistic expression that allows artists to work in partnership with community members, with architects, landscape architects, design professionals, developers, you name it, to ensure that Tempe has these unique artistic expressions throughout to create a sense of community and place. As such, I want to highlight where we are. As Craig pointed out, this is a program that's existed for several decades at this point. We have over 130 complete works of art in the built environment, 196 works of portable works, which are the works of art you see in facilities like the library, other city facilities, community centers. We maintain and care for this collection as we would any other work of infrastructure. So caring for, letting our community know that we do, in fact, cherish these works of art and keep them up. And we are currently managing 15 public art projects this fiscal year, not including these portable works I mentioned. We also maintain a pre-qualified artist list as a resource for the development community and the larger community who are looking for an artist to work with here in Tempe. And we review and consult on over 100 works created through the Art and Private Development Program and collection. So we're really working with pretty much every aspect of the community to ensure that artwork is spread throughout. And what you're looking at in this image are all the dots from the GIS map that anyone can access to see where art is within the vicinity of Tempe. So with that in mind, what a public art plan will do is help create a comprehensive plan to outline our vision for the future. and identify future locations or potential locations as the city grows and changes and develops. It will also help us to establish the guidelines for selecting and commissioning artwork that aligns with the city's strategic priorities, with the community needs, and ensures that we're really moving forward in the right direction. Our goals are based on that community input and as well as our current assets. And the hope is to strategize how to prioritize, how to plan for the future, and align those new projects with the development and community need. We also hope to create some more diversification and equity in terms of access to the public art collection and reach a broader audience throughout Tempe. So with that, this plan should identify areas within the program that is really working well and some areas where we could add and bolster our growth. The city has hired Designing Local, a firm that has over 10 years of experience working on like plans. They've completed over 50 public art plans throughout the country, and something that really made them stand out was their areas of expertise extend beyond public art and into creative placemaking, historic preservation, community planning, all the things that we really look at to guide our current public art program and to help us really see how we can broaden our reach. Another thing that made this team stand out was their approach to outreach. They really want to meet people where they're at, meet a multi-generational and a diverse audience in different ways. We all know that some community members will come to a virtual meeting, some want to pop up. Sometimes you have to go where people are. And in their presentation and in their past experience, they've shown us that they have this ability. As such, we've started working with them on that outreach and engagement strategy already, taking our pop-up into the Arts and Parks events. You'll be seeing cards and information at other arts-related events, neighborhood events. We have pop-ups planned both in North and South Tempe, at community centers and at local businesses. We'll also be going to boards and commissions to share this presentation and ensure that, again, we're reaching people where they are, and we're reaching as many layers within the city as we possibly can to ensure that we're getting that input that we need to make a smart plan for the future. So with that, where we've been and where we're going in our timeline, we're already working with this consulting team. We've started, our survey went live in October. We've done several in-person pop-up events and had great conversations with the communities thus far. But through the winter, you'll see the public art team and the consulting team at various places throughout November, December, and then even into January. The online survey is available and open until January 31st. And our hope is that we can get that kind of input that we need so that the spring we'll be able to look at that preliminary draft engagement report and start developing a plan that we can bring back to you in the winter of 2025. So with that, happy to answer questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Vice Mayor Garland?
Does this public art take into consideration the artwork that's at Donnell Plaza?
That is not part of the city collection. However, the consulting team did go to Donnell Plaza and is looking at all aspects of art within the city. So yes.
Because it's such a great art display in one area. If people haven't been there, the art has changed lately, but you should go look at it, especially at night. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Council, any other further comments or questions? All right, seeing none. Craig, I also want to note too, I apologize for my initial intro of you. Councilmember Amberg reminded me that you are to be referred to as the Craig Hayden. So my sincere apologies, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, I think I finally, 4.5 years, and finally got Craig to completely break character. So I'll give the assist to Councilmember Amberg on that one. Thank you. All right, next up here, item number 3E, the open meeting law review, and I see Eric has moved from one seat to the next. So he's going to give us a presentation on item 3E. Mr. Anderson.
I want to take the hot seat, Mayor, so you could grill me if you want. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Two-part presentation tonight. You'll recall at your retreat in June, we did a extensive discussion of the open meeting law. What I've done is taken that and I've condensed that down to a short 10-minute video just to refresh and set. And one of the things that we're going to focus on tonight after that will be a live presentation that will focus on the executive session and kind of the nuts and bolts that go into an executive session. So if Eddie is ready, I'll roll the video. If there are any questions, we can always stop the video, but we'll always take questions later. And just for your notes, we have it on as an executive session item for Thursday. If there are any fact-specific questions that anyone would prefer to be asked confidentially, we'll have that available as well. So.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hello there. I'm Eric Anderson, Tempe City Attorney, and I put together this video. It's a short video on the open meeting law. The goal of this video is to help guide you as you serve the city in your capacity as mayor and city council. So we're going to go through some of the basics of the open meeting law in this video, and then there'll be other topics, more intensive training available at other times. So what is the open meeting law? The open meeting law, or OML, as you may sometimes see it in short form, is the general policy of the state of Arizona that all public bodies must conduct their meetings in a manner that is open and transparent unless certain limited exceptions apply. A public body is a broad term and includes counties, cities, and towns, and even special districts such as Salt River Project. For mayor and council, it is important to remember that the OML applies to all boards and commissions of the city, as well as any formally established subcommittees of the city council. I want to focus on the legal definition of a subcommittee, as this can impact how you interact with your fellow city council members in your everyday dealings. Two council members talking to each other at random does not create a subcommittee. For a subcommittee, you need to have a formal action. Two things need to happen to have an official subcommittee. One, the subcommittee must be formally established by either the mayor designating the subcommittee or the council voting in an open meeting to establish a subcommittee. And two, the subcommittee must be established to make recommendations regarding a specific purpose, and those recommendations are recommendations to the entire body of the council. You will recall that the rules of procedure that were adopted by this council to govern its meetings and dealings provide specific procedures for establishing a subcommittee. When you follow those procedures, you will have a subcommittee that is legally defined as in accordance with the open meeting law. If you don't establish those procedures, you probably won't have a subcommittee, and your everyday conversations with one or two council members probably do not constitute a subcommittee. Next, I want to talk about meetings. Although seemingly simplistic, as we cover the topic of meetings, please keep in mind that the definition of a meeting for open meeting law purposes is much different than the everyday use of that term. The open meeting law defines a meeting as any gathering, either in person or through technological devices, of a quorum of members of the public body where they discuss, propose, or take legal action with respect to an action that may come before the public body. As a refresher, a quorum is the number of council members required to be present to take action, typically a majority of the council in most instances. In some instances, a supermajority of the council may be necessary for a vote, but you should still consider a quorum as 4 members of the public body. A meeting can consist of oral discussions, notes, text messaging, emailing, social media, or any combination thereof where the council's business is discussed by a quorum of its members. If there is to be a meeting of the council in any form, we are required to post notice of the meeting at least 24 hours in advance and except in cases of emergency. And the posting needs to be on the internet and on the city's website, as well as certain designated places that the clerk handles. One of the things that is important to discuss in this video is the concept of accidental meetings. So what that means is that if you are not mindful of the open meeting law, accidental meetings can occur and result in a legal violation. For example, if several of your fellow council members are all part of the same neighborhood chat group on the internet, you could inadvertently have a meeting if the council's business is discussed through the chat group. But before you panic, please keep in mind that it will only be seen as a meeting if you are discussing the council's business. For example, discussions, deliberations, considerations, or consultations regarding issues that may foreseeably come to the council for action. If you are just talking to your fellow council members and sharing your favorite recipes, that would not be considered a meeting for open meeting law purposes. The published agenda will establish the limits of what can be discussed by the council at a properly noticed meeting. The agenda item listed should be sufficient to apprise the public of the subject of discussion, and then discussion for that agenda item must be limited to subjects reasonably related to the agenda item. If it is not related to an agenda item, it should not be discussed at the meeting. One of the pitfalls of the open meeting law and the difficulty of the definition of the meeting is the concept of serial communications. When you think of all the different forms of communication in use in modern society, keep in mind that a meeting that is subject to the open meeting law does not have to occur at the same time and place. What I am talking about is serial communications where messages or discussions get relayed to a quorum of the members. For example, if you're on a 7-person council, if you send an email to one other council member about council business, that is probably okay. However, if one of you turns around and forwards that email to 2 other council members, you now have a quorum and a meeting. So if notice and agenda have not been published, you could be inadvertently violating the OML by forwarding these emails. And this applies to all forms of communication. If you and one other council member are texting each other about council business, and then you each agree to talk to one other council member about the same thing, you now have a quorum involved in the discussion and a potential OML concern. It is prohibited to try and skirt the requirements of the open meeting law by having an intermediary non-member relay communications. For example, Tempe City staff are advised not to relay communications between council members. So you cannot ask the staff liaison to talk to other council members and find out what they are thinking regarding an item. However, city staff can initiate a one-way communication to council members for limited purposes. For example, if a city staff member prepares a PowerPoint to present to the council at a properly noticed meeting, he or she may email that to you in advance for preparation. Typically, the PowerPoint will be posted with the agenda for the public to share. But you cannot discuss the topic with a quorum of the council members until the regular meeting occurs. You can review the PowerPoint and formulate questions that you may have, but you should wait for the discussion until the actual meeting at the noticed time and place. The easy thing to remember is that your staff liaison will be working with the commission to make sure that an agenda is created and properly published. Once the properly noticed meeting is held and an agenda item is called, the council can freely discuss that issue together and anything else reasonably related to the discussion. Now that we've covered the basic concepts of the open meeting law, I want to discuss briefly the exceptions to the open meeting law that will impact your everyday service to the city. The main exception is the executive session. Executive sessions are an exception to the requirement for open meetings in that the council can have executive sessions which are not open to the public under limited circumstances. An executive session is limited to only those members of the public body and city staff or other persons that are reasonably necessary to help the discussion. Executive sessions are limited to a list of enumerated exceptions in state law. However, we are still required to post a notice and agenda in advance of the executive session in the same manner as regular meetings. That means that the agenda for an executive session must identify the subject of the discussion, and the discussion for that item must be limited accordingly. In addition to the regular posting requirements of the open meeting law for open sessions, state law also requires that an executive session agenda also identify the specific exception to the open meeting law. For example, if the city attorney's office intended to provide confidential legal advice to the council, we may ask you to hold an executive session, and we would provide agenda language for the discussion and identify ARS 38-431.03A3 as the exception. The next slide contains a list of exceptions for executive sessions recognized by the open meeting law. You will see that with the exception of international interstate negotiations, the exceptions listed here can be commonly encountered in conducting the business of the city. But keep in mind that the executive session is strictly limited to the topic of the agenda as well as the purposes of the particular exception. Also remember that the council cannot take any legal action in an executive session, but can only provide direction to staff for matter to be further considered on a regular council meeting agenda if legal action is desired. Executive sessions rules and procedures can be complicated. So this is an overview, and a more in-depth discussion for executive sessions will be provided separate from this video. Now that we have covered the open meeting law basics, I just want to mention some of the possible consequences for violation of the open meeting law. One of the primary concerns is that any action taken by the council which did not comply with the open meeting law could be null and void. In addition, the state attorney general and a county attorney can bring an action to impose civil penalties and attorney's fees. In extreme cases, a member could be removed from his or her position. Those are the main legal points, but violations of the open meeting law can cause the public to be distrustful as well. So we hope you'll find this video helpful in making sure that all of us comply with the open meeting law. Your understanding and compliance with the open meeting law is very important to the city. At the city attorney's office, we want to make sure that you have tools you need to protect yourself and the city from violating the open meeting law. With that said, this presentation is just the basics and does not cover all the intricacies and nuances of the OML and its related issues. Please keep in mind that the city attorney's office is available to you if you encounter a situation and need additional guidance or direction. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that doesn't end the presentation. That I did do that video so it would be available for, and also so we could expedite that review of what we covered in June. So Eddie, if you'll pull up those slides. I just got a few slides. What we've been asked to do is kind of focus on the nuts and bolts side of how an executive session becomes an executive session, and cover the things that the staff in my office as well as the clerk's office do to try and make sure that you all can be comfortable that we're legally having executive sessions and limiting the purposes. So this first slide is just a kind of a note that it's a three-part process. It involves both the city manager and her staff, the city clerk and her staff, as well as the city attorney's office and my staff. So next slide, please, Eddie. So typically, we start looking at executive sessions roughly 2 weeks in advance, and if anybody wants to be on an executive session, they need to make that request, and that request needs to come to the city attorney's office. It can come from, depending on the type of executive session request, it can come from department directors, city managers, or even initiated by our office in certain circumstances. So that's step one, is the request has to be made. Step two is that all executive session requests are reviewed by the city attorney's office. What we do in that case is we look, first of all, if you recall the slide previously about the list of enumerated exceptions, we make sure, the first thing we have to do is make sure that the request falls within one of the enumerated exceptions. So if we look at it and we determine that we don't see it, we'll send it back to the requester and say, we're not seeing where it falls within an exception. Please explain what you're seeking. So that's kind of step one in the process. And if we can't find an exception, because we have to note the exceptions, the state law requires that the agenda include the applicable exception, and this is what we're proceeding under. You also see that sometimes it's multiple exceptions. For example, there's a lot of overlap between legal advice and contract negotiations, so sometimes you'll see it under multiple things. That's just to make sure we cover the basis. Once we determine that it does fall within executive session, it still has to kind of pass as far as discussion amongst the city manager and myself or her staff to make sure that this is a topic that we want and ripe and ready for your review. So that's included in that step section. And then the third part of that step is to fashion the language to make sure that we're giving adequate notice of the executive session. One thing to note is the state law does allow a little leeway to make sure that you don't inadvertently disclose confidential information regarding the executive session. So if there's something that might not want to be publicly disclosed as a part of the agenda, there's a little bit more leeway as far as the exec session agenda to, for example, if we are asking you to look at some confidential records or something, we could just identify them generically rather than specifically spell anything out that might cause embarrassment or something. So, Eddie, if you'll advance. So. So step 3 are my office, and usually that's personally reviewed by me in most cases, along with other attorneys. We confirm that it's a proper agenda item, and then the clerk's office prepares a draft agenda. The city attorney's office and city manager or a delegate that's involved will review the draft agenda, and then the notice of the e-session gets posted along with the agenda. So that's step 3. Eddie, if you'll advance. Step 4 is e-session preparation materials. Those are optional, but we quite often provide materials. Those also needed to be reviewed as well, because if you'll recall, the discussion in the session is limited to the notice purpose, and you may have portions of an overall issue that some of which are part of proper discussion for an e-session and some are not. For example, my favorite example is zoning cases where you have both a development agreement and a zoning consideration. A zoning consideration as to the merits of a zoning application is not in the list of exceptions, but contract negotiations for the development agreement are. So if you go into executive session, you could talk about the contract and the negotiations, but not necessarily discuss the merits of the zoning itself. So that's just kind of an example where that line is, because the discussion still has to be limited to the item and the purposes. Okay. So that's step 4. And then finally, step 5, if you'll recall, the open meeting law only allows those persons, including the council obviously, but only those persons that are reasonably necessary to further the discussion. So the city manager and myself, and sometimes the clerk as well, we talk about it, and if necessary, determine what staff members might be necessary. We communicate that with the clerk, and then the meeting invite for the executive session is limited to just those persons. So it's a exclusive list, and that's why you'll see, and that's per item, so that's why you'll see sometimes staff will come in and out, is because when you have multiple items on for different issues, there may be different staff that meet the qualifications for the executive session. So, and then just a quick note on the day of, the law does require that this council votes to enter an executive session, and then we give you the reminder of the confidentiality requirements, and that's for reasons because the state law requires that be done. The mayor is the chair of the meeting. City attorney, my role in that is to monitor discussion to make sure it remains within the applicable exception. And then the city clerk prepares minutes. Minutes are required for an executive session. And just a quick reminder, the exec session, you can't take legal action. You can only discuss and the direction the city wants to take. Any formal legal action will have to be on a regular council meeting agenda. So that's the day of. And then one of the things I want to point out to you that I didn't cover earlier, but it's just a good thing to note. If any individual, even after all the things we've done to try to make sure we keep it legal, if you still don't feel comfortable, one of the things you can do as an individual member of the council or mayor is you can enter your objection, ask the clerk to enter an objection that you don't feel we're proceeding, and this applies to all open meeting law things, and that will give you somewhat of a safe harbor where the court can look at that and say, well, this council member objected. I'm not going to find them in violation of the open meeting law. Hopefully we never come to that, but that is available to you, so I just want to point that out quickly. And then last slide, I think, just the post-D section reminders. As I noted, the clerk prepares minutes. She posts them for you to review. Members of council can review them, but those are posted to a restricted file, so those minutes are restricted access to. This is the 4 groups of people who are, the statute identifies as allowed to review the executive session minutes. If there is a request or something, that would be, again, worked on and looked at by the clerk and myself to make sure that they aren't improperly disclosed. One exception, there's a court exception I'll give you to as far as the exec session confidentiality, is if the council communicates to staff an intent that they convey a message, for example, settlement negotiations or contract negotiations. If there's an intended communication that we want you to go back and tell the developer this, or you want, that's an exception to the confidentiality, because your intent is that it be expressed as it be communicated that. So I think that wraps it up. I'm glad to thank you for your patience. Sorry we had to do this subject again, but I'm glad to take any questions now if anybody has any. So.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Really appreciate the presentation as well as the production of the video. Does anyone have any questions for our City Attorney? All right.
If I may quickly,
yes,
you make a good point. I was remiss in not thanking Jason, and I think Eddie helped out. They were very patient with and producing that video for me, as well as another video. So I do want to thank them for their patience with somebody. So with my with me in trying to produce that video. So, but thanks to them. Thanks, Mayor.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Really appreciate it. Very thorough. Thank you. All right, I will move on then. The next item on the agenda is the call to the audience for Committee of the Whole items. There are no items listed on this section of the agenda for council consideration this evening, so I will close that item and move to the next one, which is item number 5, Committee of the Whole. So I want to state that per City Council Rule 7, subsection 2B, any 2 members of the council may propose the formation of a subcommittee at a work study session of the council by identifying the purpose of the proposed subcommittee and the proposed members of the subcommittee and obtaining approval of the majority of the council. So are there any 2 council members who have a proposal for a new council subcommittee at this time? Yes, Councilmember Amberg.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I'd like to initiate a subcommittee to ensure that we continue revitalizing the North Bank of Rio Salado and the Tempe Town Lake. I mean, we just celebrated the 25-year milestone of the lake, and I'm hearing from constituents, and I know some of the other council members are hearing from constituents that there's not a lot to do on the North Bank, that most of this stuff is going on the South Bank. So we'd like to actually activate both banks if we really want to continue being the second most, sought after visitor, location in the country. So, and we want to look at any of the future developments that staff and other residents alike would do that. So what we'd like to do is form the subcommittee and get updates from staff and stakeholders and work with conjunction with the Tempe Rio Salado Master Plan and ASU Rio Imagined. And we kind of anticipate this being more of a long range subcommittee, not like a open couple months later, get a job done and then close it, because this is going to be kind of a 5-10 year proposal. So, and I know that Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Hodge have both expressed interest on joining this with me.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent. Thank you so much. Any council members, any thoughts or questions on that item? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking forward to working on this issue, and it's very important, and we've been talking about it for a long time, so now we're going to get it into action. So love it. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and to working with Nikki and Bernetta.
Sounds good. All right. Anyone, any concerns or any objections? If not, we can move forward. All right. Madam City Manager, okay with that one?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Any other proposals for new council subcommittees at this time? Okay. Seeing none, I will move forward and see if there are council members that have any verbal updates that you'd like to provide regarding your existing council subcommittees. Vice Mayor Garland.
I just want to say that our nuisance ordinance subcommittee is continuing. Our next meeting is Friday, November 22nd at 1 p.m. If you are interested, the information to log on to be a part of the meeting will be on our website. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councilmember Hodge?
Yes, we had our first council committee for increasing advocacy for Tempe youth. Our next one is on December 13th. A few things that we focused on is possibly hiring a family advocate to serve as a liaison between the families, students, and the schools, examining transitional support services through youth and family, which focus on improving transition from school to adulthood, including career skills and pathway, and identifying simply processes for family to access resources within the community for youth with disability, And last but not least, a review of the current city-sponsored training programs to better serve the needs of our disability youth and family.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any other council members with any updates this evening? Okay, seeing none, I will close that portion of the meeting and move to item number 6, future agenda items. Members of the City Council may request that an agenda item be added to a future issue review session, but in accordance with the open meeting law, there should be no discussion on the item other than to clarify the request. Councilmember Hodge?
Yes, I do like to request that I want to put on that I'm working with the Sandy Hook promise for the city. That can be a future, of way in the future, maybe sometime in January, but I do want to put that out there that I want to add that to our agenda.
Okay, sounds good. Madam City Manager,
Mayor.
okay.
Thank you, Councilmember
Wonderful, okay,
Hodge.
thank you. Any other future agenda items? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to item number 7, announcements for the mayor and/or city manager. I don't have any announcements this evening, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a real quick thank you to our community for the overwhelming support for the bond election. The proposal, Lisette and her staff did an outstanding job, and actually this entire workforce showing up at every meeting, prepared to answer any questions constituents had. And we did a little, since it's been a data-driven evening, of course, we did a little digging on the 77% bond approval for the streets and public safety bond, which is the highest in 20 years.
Wow.
So in 2020, the streets bond question passed with 69.7. In 2016, streets passed at 73.6. Public safety at 67.8. In 2012, there was no bond question for streets. Public safety was 66.3. And then lastly, in 2008, streets passed at 71.2 and public safety at 71%. And there was no bond election in 2004. So speaks volumes to the trust this community has in all of you and the staff that's sitting here and in our workforce. So I just wanted to say a sincere thank you to the community for that. And then lastly, thank you to the workforce, and I'll write something in my weekly. That employee survey was unbelievable, and I get to do this every day with that workforce. So thank you for the accolades, but I pass that on to this team and the workforce that is doing a lot of the great work. So appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Mr. City Attorney, I think I can go back and make one other comment about those, if that's okay, the bonds. Just an announcement on my end?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was okay. Just sort of piggybacking off of Madam City Manager's comments too, I believe this is probably the first time that we've also had bond questions relating to historic preservation and affordable housing, which something about what she said spurred me to think about that. Just for the purpose of saying, I know that we've talked for a long time, mayors and council members, about how important those two issues are to us in terms of preserving our history, but also creating more affordable housing for people. And so I think, having those questions on the ballot and the overwhelming passage of both of those questions by Tempe residents also shows the council's commitments to those issues, but also shows the tremendous amount of support that our residents have for those issues as well, along with streets and public safety. So just wanted to make that announcement. So, all right, with that said, I'll move to item number 8, which is adjournment. The next regular scheduled work study session will be on December 12th, 2024. We are adjourned at 5:47 p.m. Thank you, everyone.